everyone's getting settled, I have the advantage of hearing everything up here in the front. And Noah was spot on when he came up to me a minute ago. He said, I didn't really sleep with all those little stuffy things, but I got a lot of blankets, and I was really wrapped up tight. Well, I don't know about you, but the days after Christmas often find me in a nostalgic frame of mind, and this year was no exception. And it was the gospel lesson this week that conjured up a memory of holding our firstborn, Evan, during a Christmas morning worship service. He was a month old and wrapped in that swaddling blanket as I rocked him back and forth in the pew. And my heart was full. And I don't recall what the sermon was about or what was going on around me, because for me, everything was focused on the baby. But it was what happened next that has stuck with me all these years later, and brings me back to the manger. You see, one of the elders of the congregation, her name was Edith, she tapped my shoulder from behind and said, honey, you need to hold on to this time while you can, because they grow up so fast. Now, I don't remember if those words were comforting or encouraging to me at the time, but she was right. It was a quick succession from infant to toddler to teen. And now I see that in my grandchildren. But this memory, it kind of made me chuckle a bit while reading the gospel, because the writer of Luke moves at rapid speed from the birth narrative of Jesus to the tumultuous teenage years. And if you've ever raised or been part of the life of a teenager, it's not always a fun place to be, but it's where we find ourselves today in the gospel story. We are not in the stable anymore. We are not gazing into the eyes of a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes anymore. And we are not surrounded by sentimental scenery anymore. And in all honesty, I want to linger in the stable a while. I don't want to lose my sense of expectation and have to live in the ordinary and oftentimes painful circumstances of life. I want to gaze into the face of humanity in its infant stages. I still want to hold the baby wrapped in the security of swaddling clothes and safe. But if we are to live into the reality of life, we cannot stay in the manger. Jesus didn't, and neither can we. Birth, you see, is just the beginning. It is just the beginning of God revealed in the flesh of a newborn child. It is the beginning of newness revealed in us too. But what happens when the swaddling clothes are removed and we are stripped down to the bareness of the birth? What happens when we remove the security blanket? What happens when we strip off our swaddling clothes? You know, those clothes or things that keep us from stepping into the bigger picture of God revealed in the baby. You see, if we stay in the stable, we cannot, or perhaps don't want, to grow up. But Jesus did. Jesus did not live out his life in the infancy of faith, which enabled him then to grow in insight and knowledge and relationship with the world. So, it's time to unwrap the baby blanket. And what does that look like as we gaze at a world filled with racism, division, war, occupation, and atrocities beyond human comprehension? What if we stay wrapped up? Or if we stand in the bareness of our own insecurities and self-righteousness, we cannot grow. The writer in Colossians today gives an insight into what our new clothing might look like after we step out of the stable. Listen to this. Clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness and humility, meekness and patience. And above all, clothe yourselves in love. Wow. If you ask my opinion, that's a tall order. Especially when we are stepping out of the stable into a world where this divisiveness appears to reign. Homelessness is only one rent payment or foreclosure away. Justice doesn't seem to be justice for all people. Political ideologies tear at the very fabric of families and a nation, and the genocide of an entire population is seen in the face of a child starving and waiting to die. And truthfully, it's no wonder that I, and perhaps you too, want to stay wrapped in swaddling clothes. It's easier. But we must not forget that Jesus was not born into some ideological time either. When the world was at peace, the empire and occupation ran rampant, and the marginalized were taxed and trampled every single place they went. But the baby, this baby, is calling us to live into the gift of Advent still, of longing and waiting, and into the promise of Christmas all year long. Yes, this gift that is given on Christmas is the same gift that enables us to bear with one another in the midst of the chaotic circumstances of life. It is the gift that clothes us. Mary Hinkle Shore says this, with the ability to imagine. It clothes us with the ability to imagine that God, what God imagines, a release to the captives, healing for those who are suffering, and abundant mercy for sinners of all shapes and sizes. All. You know, maybe it is time to take that first baby step and bear with one another, to forgive as Jesus forgave, and let the peace of Christmas rule deep, deep down in our hearts. But I believe that in order to do this, we must shed our own rightness, our own self-serving agendas, and our comparisons, our complaints and criticisms of one another, and bear the naked truth that we cannot keep Jesus a perpetual baby. The Gospel of Luke today doesn't. Jesus was growing up. In fact, we go from 0 to 12 in the blink of an eye, and quite frankly, this used to bother me. Many of the picture books I read as a child gave what I thought was a glimpse of the missing years. You know, Jesus in the carpentry shop with Joseph, and playing with other children on the playground, and amazing his classmates with subhuman powers. And this gap in here from birth to 12 also bothered me as I grew in my faith journey, because, as William Loader puts it, our modern interests want to know about Jesus' upbringing, the family system, the education, the life changes, adolescence, sexual development, early employment, leisure, and all we have today is one episode likely to be recreated history of the kind that reconstructs how it might have been. Our ponderings, you see, or mine at that time, they're not invalid. We like to look at people as individuals, where they came from and what they do and what they have or have not done. However, the gospel writers would not have been preoccupied with these things. The boy, Jesus, is human enough. The teenager, and this is speaking from experience, is enough. But the heart of the matter today is where we find Jesus and what he must do. He must grow. So we find him in the temple, sitting among the teachers and listening to them and asking them questions, building relationships, experiencing community. We find him dressed more as a young man coming of age than in the dependent safety of the manger. But a panic sets in when Mary and Joseph realize that Jesus is not with them as they depart from the annual pilgrimage, the festival of the Passover. Jesus is lost, and he's not with the caravan. His parents are worried sick, and I can relate to this story when once I lost one of my sons in a department store. We called them department stores. To make a long story short, I get Mary, and now I also get Jesus' response to Mary, even though it seems harsh at the onset. Once he was found inside the temple, and Jesus said to his mother, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house?" Now, the word must here used in this context reads more like absolutely. It's absolutely necessary. It's inevitable. It's what I must do. It was necessary for Jesus, and it's necessary for us too, to grow in insight and relationship with a faith community. To be clothed in the type of clothing the writer of Colossians is talking about. It needs nurturing. And above all, it needs love. Love that begins with the raw vulnerability of relationship, clothed in the Christ child. So what does happen when we remove the security blanket that keeps us snug and safe? What happens when the hope, love, and joy and peace of Christmas fades into the struggles and reality of life? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house? You know, one of the things I taught my reading students was how we interpret a sentence simply by inflection, or how we place emphasis on particular words. So bear with me here today. Did you not know I must be in my Father's house? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house? So today, the adolescence of Jesus is where we need to be right now as we move into a new year. And oh boy, this is not easy as we anticipate transitions in our own lives and as a nation. But we must keep growing. We must keep seeking new ways to be in relationship with the brokenness of the world. We must keep growing and learning through the gift of the baby. I guess my friend Edith was right. A baby doesn't stay a baby very long. It goes by fast. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to change our clothes, to unwrap those swaddling clothes, to step out of the manger and change into something change into something perhaps more grown up. Perhaps a garment laced with love. Amen.